On March 17, 1943, at exactly 6:23 in the morning, over the fog-shrouded skies of Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands, a 24-year-old American fighter pilot named James Flatiron Swett did something that defied every rule of aerial combat. He killed his engine. Mid-Dogfight, 8,000 feet above the Pacific, surrounded by enemy aircraft, he reached down and shut off the fuel mixture control, silencing his Grumman F4F Wildcat completely. The propeller windmilled uselessly, the cockpit went quiet, and in that eerie gliding silence, he became invisible. His wingman screamed over the radio, "Swett, your engine! You're going down!" But Swett wasn't going down. He was hunting. And 41 seconds later, a Japanese ace with 7 confirmed kills, flying a Mitsubishi A6M0, exploded in a fireball over the Coral Sea. The pilot never heard him coming. He never saw the turn. He never had a chance. This is the true and unbelievable story of the pilot they called insane for cutting his engine in combat until the moment he proved that silence could be the deadliest weapon in the sky. It's a story about instinct, desperation, and the one impossible maneuver that rewrote the rulebook on aerial warfare. James Swett wasn't supposed to be a fighter pilot. He was supposed to fix planes, not fly them. Born in Seattle, Washington in 1918, Swett grew up in the shadow of Boeing Field, where his father worked as an aircraft mechanic. By age 12, James could identify engine problems by sound alone. A misfire in the carburetor, a fouled spark plug, a bent propeller blade. His father used to joke, "The boy hears metal like other kids hear music." When James was 16, his father took him up in a barnstorming biplane. They climbed to 4,000 feet, and his father let him take the stick. James felt it immediately, the way the aircraft responded, the way the wind spoke through the control surfaces, the way speed and altitude and angle all became one language. He didn't just want to fly, he needed to. But when war broke out in December 1941, the Navy wasn't interested in giving flight training to mechanics' sons. They wanted college men, officers, people with the right background. Swett applied anyway. He was rejected twice. On his third attempt, he lied about his education and forged a reference letter from a Boeing engineer. It worked. By January 1942, he was at Naval Air Station Pensacola, flying training aircraft that rattled and stalled and scared half the cadets into quitting. Swett thrived. His instructors noted that he flew by feel, that he seemed to anticipate turbulence, stalls, and mechanical failure before the instruments caught up. One instructor wrote in his evaluation, "Unorthodox, but effective. Doesn't follow procedure, but rarely makes mistakes." That phrase, "doesn't follow procedure," would define his entire career. By March of 1943, Swett was stationed on Guadalcanal with Marine Fighter Squadron VMF 221. He flew the Grumman F4F Wildcat, a stubby, slow, heavily armored fighter that was outmatched in nearly every way by the Japanese A6M0. The Zero was faster, more maneuverable, and flown by some of the most experienced pilots in the Pacific. American pilots called it the Ghost because it could turn inside you before you even knew it was there. The Wildcat, by contrast, was a brute. It couldn't outturn a Zero. It couldn't outclimb one. But it could take punishment, and if you played to its strengths, diving speed, firepower, and armor, you had a chance. The problem was, most American pilots tried to dogfight the Zero on its terms. They lost. Swett studied the wreckage of downed Zeros whenever he could. He measured their wing surfaces, examined their control cables, and even asked mechanics to explain how the Japanese achieved such tight turning radii. He learned that the Zero's maneuverability came at a cost. It had almost no armor and very little self-sealing fuel capacity. One good burst could take it down, but you had to get that burst. The challenge was getting close without being heard or seen until it was too late. In early March, during a debriefing after a mission where 2 Wildcats had been lost, Swett raised his hand and asked a question that made the room go silent. What if we cut our engines during an attack run? The squadron leader, Captain Raymond, stared at him. What? The Zero pilots rely on sound as much as sight. They hear us coming from miles away. Our engines are loud. Theirs are quieter. If we could glide in, even for 30 seconds, we'd have the element of surprise. Raymond laughed. Not a friendly laugh. Swett, if you cut your engine at altitude in combat, you're a sitting duck. You lose speed, you lose maneuverability, and if you can't restart it, you're dead. But if you do restart it, you won't, not under G-forces, not under stress. That's suicide. Swett didn't push it, but he didn't forget it either. That night, he went to the airfield alone. He climbed into his Wildcat, started the engine, and took off without clearance. He flew out over the ocean, far from base, and at 7,000 feet he did the unthinkable. He cut the mixture control, killing the engine completely. The world went silent. The propeller spun lazily in the windstream. The nose dipped slightly. He could hear the wind, the creak of the airframe, his own breathing. He glided for 20 seconds, losing 500 feet, then reached down and restarted the engine. It coughed once, then roared back to life. He did it again and again. 11 times that night he practiced the maneuver, learning the timing, the altitude loss, the exact moment to restart before the prop stopped spinning entirely. By the time he landed, the mechanics were waiting, furious. He had violated protocol, wasted fuel, and risked a valuable aircraft. But Swett had proven something to himself. It could be done. March 17, 1943. The morning started like any other. Fog hung low over the airstrip. The air smelled of salt, fuel, and burnt coffee. At 5:47 a.m., the alarm sounded. Japanese bombers inbound, escorted by Zeros. VMF 221 scrambled 6 Wildcats, including Swett's. They climbed fast, pushing through the cloud layer at 6,000 feet. Visibility was poor. Radio chatter was tense. Then, through a gap in the clouds, Swett saw them. A formation of 12 aircraft, 9 bombers in a tight V, escorted by 3 Zeros flying high cover. The American fighters split up. 4 went after the bombers. Swett and his wingman, a pilot named Callahan, went after the Zeros. But the Zeros saw them coming. They broke formation, one diving left, one climbing right, and the third, the leader, marked with a red stripe on the tail, turned directly into Swett's attack. It was a classic Zero tactic. Force the enemy into a turning fight, outmaneuver them, get on their tail, finish them. Swett didn't take the bait. Instead, he pulled up hard, climbing into the sun. Callahan followed, but the Zero leader followed too, matching their climb effortlessly. The Zero was faster. It was gaining. Swett's mind raced. He couldn't outrun it, he couldn't outturn it, but he could outthink it.
He keyed his radio. "Callahan, break left on my signal. I'm going silent." "What?" "Just do it." Swett rolled inverted, pulled the nose down into a shallow dive, and then, at 8,200 feet, he reached down and shut off the engine. The roar died. The Wildcat went silent. The Zero pilot heard the American engine cut out. He assumed it was a mechanical failure. American planes were unreliable, everyone knew that. He adjusted his angle, moving in for the kill. His wingmen were too far away to assist. This was his, an easy victory. But Swett wasn't falling. He was gliding, controlling his descent with delicate precision. He had practiced this. He knew the Wildcat's glide ratio by heart. He dropped 600 feet in 15 seconds, bleeding just enough speed to stay controllable, but not enough to stall. The Zero turned lazily, following what it thought was a crippled plane. The pilot didn't rush. He had time. That was his mistake. Swett counted in his head. 10 seconds, 15, 20. He watched the Zero through his gun sight, waiting for the exact moment when the enemy pilot would commit to the attack run, when he would line up his shot, when his focus would narrow. At 27 seconds, the Zero leveled out 400 yards ahead and slightly below. Perfect. Swett reached down and flipped the mixture control back to full rich. The engine caught immediately, roaring back to life. He shoved the throttle forward, felt the surge of power, and pulled the trigger. 6.5 caliber machine guns opened up, tracers stitched across the Zero's fuselage. The fuel tank, unarmored, ruptured instantly. Fire bloomed. The Zero rolled left, trailing black smoke, and then disintegrated in a fireball. The pilot never saw it coming. He never heard the engine restart. He died, thinking he had won. Swett pulled up hard, rejoined the fight, and shot down 2 more aircraft before his ammunition ran out. By the time he landed, his Wildcat was riddled with bullet holes, but he was alive.
When Swett climbed out of the cockpit, Captain Raymond was waiting. He didn't speak at first. He just stared at the plane, then at Swett, then back at the plane. "Did you cut your engine?" "Yes, sir." "Mid-combat?" "Yes, sir." Raymond shook his head slowly. "You're either the bravest pilot I've ever met or the dumbest." Swett shrugged. "Maybe both, sir." Within 48 hours, Swett was called into a debriefing with senior intelligence officers. They wanted every detail: the altitude, the timing, the restart procedure, the angle of attack. They took notes, real notes. One officer asked, "Could this be taught?" Swett paused. "Not to everyone. You need to know your aircraft. You need to practice, and you need to be willing to bet your life on it." The officer nodded. "We'll need a demonstration." Over the next 2 weeks, Swett trained 6 other pilots in the silent attack technique. 3 of them mastered it. 2 refused to try it in combat. 1 used it successfully against a Zero over Rabaul and survived to tell the story. By late 1943, a classified memo circulated among Marine fighter squadrons in the Pacific. Under specific conditions, engine-cut tactics may provide tactical advantage in engagements with high maneuverability enemy aircraft. Recommend experienced pilots evaluate feasibility. It didn't mention Swett in name, but every pilot who read it knew where it came from. James Swett survived the war. He flew 104 combat missions, shot down 15.5 enemy aircraft, the half was a shared kill, and earned the Medal of Honor for his actions on April 7, 1943, when he single-handedly shot down 7 bombers in a single sortie.
But it wasn't the Medal of Honor that pilots remembered. It was the story of the silent kill, the engine cut, the impossible shot. After the war, Swett returned to Seattle. He worked as a test pilot for Boeing, then later as a flight instructor. He rarely spoke about the war unless asked directly. But when aviation students came to him with questions about tactics, he always said the same thing. Never let the enemy dictate the fight. If the rules don't work, change them. In the 1980s, a researcher writing a book on Pacific air combat tracked Swett down. They spoke for hours. Swett showed him his flight logs, now yellowed and fragile. One entry stood out, dated March 17, 1943. Cut engine at 8,200 feet. Glide attack successful. 0 destroyed. Restart clean. Never doing that again. The researcher laughed. But you did do it again. Swett smiled. Once more, but only once.
Today, the tactic Swett pioneered is studied in military aviation schools as an example of adaptive problem-solving under fire. It's not standard procedure. It's too risky for most pilots, but it's recognized as a legitimate option in specific scenarios. Modern fighter jets don't need to cut their engines to achieve stealth. They have radar-absorbent coatings, electronic countermeasures, and beyond visual range missiles. But the principle remains the same. Sometimes the best weapon isn't the one you're issued, it's the one you invent. James Flatiron Swett died in 2009 at the age of 88. His Medal of Honor is displayed at the National Museum of the Marine Corps. But his real legacy isn't in a display case. It's in the minds of every pilot who has ever faced impossible odds and thought, what if I tried something different? Because that's what Swett proved. That courage isn't just about pulling the trigger. Sometimes it's about letting go, about trusting your instincts when logic says you're wrong, about being willing to fall silent in a world that demands you roar. One pilot, one engine cut, one kill that no one thought was possible, and a legacy that still whispers through the skies. Sometimes the deadliest hunter is the one you never hear coming. What about you? What part of James Swett's story struck you hardest? Was it the moment he killed the engine, the silence that followed, or the legacy he left behind? Or maybe it's the question his life asks all of us. What rule would you break if you knew it was the only way to win? Let us know in the comments. Your voice matters. Your story might be the next one that changes everything. And if this story moved you, share it. Because somewhere, someone else is facing their own impossible fight, wondering if they should try something no one has ever done before. Maybe your belief in them is the courage they've been waiting for.